Today on the official Marvel podcast, we travel down the Witch's Road alongside the cast and creatives behind Marvel Television's Agatha All Along.
Just to be on stage with Patti LuPone is like a bucket list for me. So I was like, I can't believe that happened.
Plus, we chat with Professor of Renaissance and Magical Literatures, Marian Gibson, about the real-world histories of witchcraft and witches.
That sort of witch starts to remind you of the witches that we see today, you know, the superheroines.
And to round things out, we are taking a peek behind the curtain with Marvel Comics VP and Executive Editor Nick Lowe as he breaks down how a comic book is made.
Comics are the best art form ever created. And the reason is because we hire the best writers, artists, letterers, and colorists in the business to do them.
I'm Ray Lowe.
And I'm Preeti Chibber.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
All right, I don't know if you can believe it, but we are just 2 short weeks away from the premiere of Agatha All Along on Disney+.
You know what that means, Preeti? It means we're that much closer to Halloween because I have had the idea of Agatha really starting my spooky season off, and I am so excited to get there. But it is so crazy because I feel like it was just yesterday that we got that awesome cast performance of The Ballad of the Witch's Road on stage at D23, the ultimate Disney fan event. It was incredible. It was spooky. It was everything that I wanted from this cast.
I mean, it was pretty spectacular. The room was blacked out, fog crept across the stage, and a mysterious purple glow backlit the performance. Front and center, a pair of sliding doors opened. They reveal an ominous figure wearing a purple hooded cloak. We didn't quite know who it was yet, as the hood covered the majority of their face. All we saw was their red-stained lips singing the opening of the ballad.
And it wasn't just them. They were slowly joined by a handful of other cloaked figures as they lined up single file behind the first figure. And then the red-lipped hooded figure revealed her face, and it's Kathryn Hahn.
What?
Yeah, exactly. It was a surprise, Kathryn Hahn. And she was joined by the cast of Agatha All Along. We had Ali Ahn, Sashir Zamata, oh, my theater girl heart, Patti LuPone. If they were going to make a witchy stage performance, that is exactly who you call up for that. I cannot wait to see her bring her dramatics to the show. Rounding out the cast was Deborah Jo Rupp, Aubrey Plaza, and of course, Joe Locke. Each of the witches joined alongside Hahn as they continued to sing.
And of course, the performance wasn't complete without an ending fit for a witch. I mean, I have to say, I am truly jealous that I didn't get to see it in person. I mean, luckily, we were able to chat with the cast and crew about that performance, and let me just tell you that, Ray, you're not the only one who is fangirling over Patti LuPone. I mean, how could you be? Like, that's just not even something that I could compute, that only one person would fangirl over Patti.
Patti brings Patti's own energy. How can we not all collectively screech about it?
In fact, here is Kathryn Hahn's immediate reaction after that performance.
I think we're all definitely out of body right now, but it was so fun. I mean, that was so fun. That song is incredible. So I think also just to be on stage with Patti LuPone is like a bucket list for me. So I was like, I can't believe that happened. I love karaoke. And so actually to be just singing with her is that's where I am right now. It's like a little shaky about it.
I'm not sure I can think of, that's not true. I could think of something more terrifying, but genuinely, like, the idea of performing on stage next to Patti LuPone is so, so terrifying.
I would agree, but I think I would jump at the chance. Also, Preeti, I will be asking you what's more terrifying for you than that later. I need to know your dark secrets.
This is the spooky episode.
Exactly. It gets spooky. But for actors Deborah Jo Rupp, Sasheer Zamata, and Alian, they were running on nothing but pure adrenaline during that performance.
I think we were so terrified. I mean, we walked out in smoke.
Yeah.
So first we were just trying to find each other, you know, so that was like half the battle. And then it just went up so high. The people were so high.
Yeah, it just looks like blue lights everywhere. Yeah. It's actually kind of beautiful to look at.
Yeah. And the energy was so great. Everyone's so excited to be here and like see what Disney's doing. And
I feel that they liked our show best.
I think they liked our show best.
I do feel that. I'm pretty sure. We did feel like Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
We did.
If you told me I was going to be singing in a stadium next to Patti LuPone, like, no way.
Yeah. And we've only sung the song on set, which is nothing compared to thousands of people out there. So it was quite a journey.
And of course, we also got to hear from the composers and writers of The Ballad of the Witches' Road, Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez.
What we've cooked up with Agatha All Along is this wonderful song that is actually full of, it's kind of a roadmap, full of puzzles and clues to how things are going to unfold. And between the smoke and Catherine's incredible charisma and the entire cast's incredible vocals, it hit exactly as we were hoping.
Yeah, I always get hair stand up on my back of my neck when I hear the song. I wrote it, but I didn't believe that it would be this good.
And we didn't know Patti LuPone was going to be going like down, down, down. It's been a lifelong dream to work with her, so it's a thrill.
I love how everyone is freaking out over Patti LuPone, Preeti. I'm called it here next. Rightfully so. That woman's a legend. I'm dedicating this episode to you, Patti. Call me.
This is the official Patti LuPone podcast. Thank you for listening.
Oh gosh, don't make me laugh. Well, okay. If Patti hasn't watched herself already, and if you haven't watched Patti, you can watch the full performance of The Ballad of the Witches' Road from D23 over on the official Marvel YouTube channel.
And hopefully that will satiate your appetite for now until Agatha All Along premieres on September 18th, only on Disney+. All right, Ray, I have to ask because I feel like this is a big question, especially for women like us who have specific interests. But what do you think of when you hear the word witches?
Melting with water, pointy hats, green skin, a broomstick to fly on, a cauldron for potions. Why? Why?
Well, our next guest may not be singing, but she has been studying witches and witchcraft for nearly 30 years. And she's written over a dozen books on the subject too. And I recently got to chat with her about the history of witchcraft and also dig into why the myth of the witch has managed to survive through the years, including inside of Marvel Comics. So I am very excited to welcome Marian Gibson to the podcast. Hello, Marian. Thank you for coming by.
Hello, Preeti. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Tell us a bit about yourself and your body of work. Like, what is it about witchcraft that fascinates you, and how did you get into witchcraft?
Well, I found it my mistake, really. But what really got me into it was reading a 16th century newspaper account, if you like, of a witch trial. In that account, I was reading the voices of women who'd been accused of witchcraft and the people who accused them. And they were just ordinary villagers, and you hardly ever get to hear from those people. As time went on, I got more and more interested, not just in hearing their voices, but in thinking about the kind of magic they were being accused of doing and whether I thought they could do that or not. And if not, why I thought people might have picked them to accuse. I just got increasingly excited about it.
That is a great lead into my next question because I am so curious. This is a big ask, but can you give us a brief overview of the history of witchcraft? Like, what is it and when did maybe it first appear? How did it come to be? Is it real? Like all of these questions.
All of the questions. Okay, great. So a witch in the past was a person who was thought to be using magic and using it in an evil way. In some cases, witches might be thought to be working with the devil to give them power to do evil magic, or in other places it might be they were working with demons, or it might be they were thought to be harming people, making people sick. But there was also a bit of a problem in defining what evil magic was. So in some places, it was doing things like looking for hidden treasure, which actually sounds like quite a benign, good kind of activity. You know, that's a good thing, right? Except in some jurisdictions, no, it wasn't. That was wicked, because the devil, you know, was inducing you to be greedy and want all of that treasure, and God didn't mean you to have it. So I hope that helps people think about what a witch might be. But you can already see that beyond the basics, it's also got a lot of flexibility built in.
In this sort of long tradition of witches, can you look to sort of an historical point when it began, or it originated? Is there a root there?
Yes, I think so. And I think the root is the kind of late Middle Ages. So you get a whole class of clergymen called demonologists who study demons, naturally enough. And one of the things that they start studying is the idea of the witch. So they are the people who really codify this. And they start to say, well, you know, a witch is always using evil magic. Here are the ways in which it is evil. And the devil is always involved. And that meant that this was a matter for the church, and the church would go after people who it thought were evil magic users, and that kicks off a long series of witch trials that really run throughout the sort of 16th to 18th century. That's the peak period of witch trials. You know, terrible things happen to people in this period, and that's really when the idea of the witch and the witch trial get going.
Was there something appealing about witchcraft accusations that sort of took hold in that moment?
I think so, yeah. I think you need circumstances to come together when a society is going to start scapegoating a particular kind of person. There's all sorts of changes going on at the time. Some of it's religious. So the Catholic Church, which has more or less controlled Christian Europe up to that point, splits in half. You know, on the one hand, you've got God's good people over here, and then the other people over there, so they must be the devil's people, right? You know, they've got this wrong. So you get this sort of binary sense that people are either good or evil, and that helps create the idea of the witch, I think.
It is fascinating. Is there a reality to it? Is it real in the sense of how we might consider things real?
Depends what you mean by real, doesn't it? I don't personally believe that magic is real, although I'm always happy to hear from people that do. But I do think for the people who used it in those terms, they would have thought of it as real, and so would their accusers too. You know, they thought that they were accusing people who were doing evil magic.
In Marvel Comics, we have a lot of witches, we have a lot of magic, and they're often seen as superpowers. Are there historical cases where we know a witch used their power for the greater good?
Yes, I think so. They seem to have this kind of infinite power. And, you know, yeah, there are people in the Marvel Universe, clearly, aren't there, like Storm, who raises storms. Those kind of things can be deployed against people that the witches or those employing them see as wicked people. I think this is why people often see witches today as superheroes and heroines, as people who are actually, you know, we want to be on their side. We identify with them. So, yes, I think witches often did think and were thought by others to be using their powers for good, but churchmen and magistrates tended to think that they weren't.
We have witches in our comics like Agatha Harkness or Scarlet Witch who have these flamboyant costumes, and they're very open about using their magic. Was there ever a case of a witch in history who was very open about who they were and what they did?
Actually, a lot of them had built up their witchcraft as a business. And I think to some of them, it brought a kind of power, not just money. There's a woman in Austria in the 1480s, for example, called Helena Schäuberin. She's accused of being a witch by the Inquisition. She's somebody who speaks out against a person who comes to a community specifically to make witchcraft accusations. She's noisy. She tells them to leave her community, to leave the women there alone. She's quite a glamorous and intelligent and attractive person. And that sort of witch starts to remind you of the witches that we see today, you know, the superheroines, doesn't it?
Agatha, who's one of our most famous witches, I think, she's often seen with her black cat, her familiar. Can you go a little deeper into what a familiar might be in witchcraft lore?
It's mostly an English phenomenon. So, on the one hand, you've got these European folk tales about your Puss in Boots and talking animals that you meet in the forest. And on the other hand, you've got this idea that the animal devil is the familiar that goes around with the witch and is one of the ways that she can be identified because, she's got the demonic cat or whatever. So that's absolutely historically correct, yeah.
What are some positive and negative reasons as to why the witchcraft mythology and the idea of witches has enabled the myth to last for so long?
Okay, yeah, bad news first. We tend to persecute people, so we always need an enemy. But since the 18th century, a lot of people look at the figure of the witch and think, here is a person who's seen as outside of society. Here's somebody who's a bit rebellious, who's a bit different. Here's a powerful woman. Oh, that's all very interesting and attractive. And people start to reclaim the idea of the witch. So I think feminists, activist groups of all kinds have seized on the figure of the witch and thought that's somebody who can represent me. I'm a bit like that person. The witch is still with us for those positive reasons as well.
Well, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming by to talk to us about all things witchcraft.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I am always happy to talk about witches. Thank you.
Just thinking about and listening to her talk about the real world implications of what witchcraft has done, both from like a feminist perspective and from a pop culture perspective, is so fascinating. Like, we literally would not have Scarlet Witch or Agatha without these histories. I have a big question. If you had a familiar, what would it be?
Okay, it's weird. I think I've been waiting for someone to ask me this question my entire life. I just got chills, Preeti. It's hard not to be stereotypical. And I just want to say cat. I own 16 of them. But if I'm really thinking about my personality, I want something that is so niche, like a quokka from the Australia.
You'd be so happy.
Aren't they? They just smile all the time. Like, imagine you're just having a tough day and your little quokka familiar just like tumbles out of a room, rolls up to you and just gives you that big, like, joyous smile. And listeners, if you have not looked up a quokka yet, please do. What would yours be, Preeti?
Well, I'm a little stuck because what we learned in this interview is that familiars are tiny demons. And so you have this quokka who is representative of the sweet, bubbly, cute animal that is screaming inside because it's a demon and it demands to be taken seriously.
Yes, absolutely. Like, it's so rainbows during the day, and then I go to sleep at night and this thing like rolls out with its whole entire posse on the street, just causing havoc, has like its own little pitchfork.
The evilest quokka. Now, while Marian Gibson is an expert on all things witches, our next guest is an absolute expert when it comes to making comics at Marvel. In fact, he is famous around the bullpen for his yearly internal presentation on how comics are made. And this week, we've decided to share one of those presentations with you.
Yes, we're of course talking about Marvel Comics VP and executive editor Nick Lowe. Now, you might know him as the head of the Spider Office, where he's worked on books like Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Verse, but he's also worked on titles like Doctor Strange, She-Hulk, and The Runaways.
Let's hear from Nick about how to make comics.
You may know the Avengers, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Deadpool from the fantastic movies, the amazing television shows, the uncanny video games. You probably also know that they all started off as comic books. You might not know how a comic was made. Well, that's what I'm here to tell you about. My name is Nick Lowe. I'm the Spider-Man editor at Marvel Comics, and I love comics. Comics are the best art form ever created. Way better than those other things I was talking about. Sorry, everybody. But it's true. Comics are the best. And the reason is because we hire the best writers, artists, letters, and colorists in the business to do them. Comics like Amazing Spider-Man 797 that I'm going to tell you about today. The comic all starts with the writer. So I'm an editor. I hire the writers and artists. And for this, I hired Dan Slott. Well, He'd already been writing Amazing Spider-Man for almost 10 years before we did this comic. And he's one of the best in the business, lives here in New York City, and sitting in his apartment at his computer in New York City, he types the script of a comic. We've got page 8, panel 1, 4 hours earlier. Cut to Spidey swinging around Midtown. Locator cap. 4 hours ago, locator cap. Midtown. Spidey caption. Focus, Parker. Think about work. Your next feature for the Bugle. Spidey caption. Or Spidey stuff. Some loose thread you need to follow up on. So Dan does that, and he's one of the best in the business at it. You ever heard of a thing called Spider-Verse? You can thank Dan for that. He's amazing. So he does this for 20 pages an issue. When he's satisfied and when I'm satisfied, we send it off to the middle of nowhere, Canada, where Stuart Immonen opens his email, downloads the script, sees this, puts a piece of paper on his board, grabs a pencil. That's right, a pencil and a paper. Still the two best inventions ever. Sorry, sliced bread, but this is really the best. So Stuart takes what is pretty easy for Dan to write, cut to Spidey swinging around Midtown, and he does amazingly detailed buildings in the background. The buildings frame Spidey's arm, which leads you to Spidey's head. We have a beautiful webbing continuing to frame Spidey, and it all points to panel 2, where we have our purse snatcher running away from the purse snatchee, and way in the background, way up there, is a teeny tiny Spider-Man. But you can't miss him because Stuart is so good, and he framed him perfectly and silhouetted him there. To panel 3, he moves the camera down so we can see our purse snatcher getting whipped by Spidey's webbing. And then he gets pulled around this lamppost from a worm's eye view up to a bird's eye view, jerking you around along with the purse snatcher to where we got our purse snatcher hanging from a lamppost and Spidey looking up, admiring his handiwork. It is amazing what Stuart does. He's been doing it for many years. He's one of the best in the business. And so when he's satisfied and when I'm satisfied, he puts it in a box and mails it off to South Carolina, where Wade Von Grawbadger gets a box. And he opens it up, pulls out the page, and I imagine sits there for half an hour just staring at it. How is this so beautiful? And he takes it, puts it on his table, takes out a bottle of India ink, a brush, a pen, some markers. So he is an inker, and what an inker does is he takes the penciler's work, gives it a little bit more depth, more definition, and he helps make the artwork clear, concise, and beautiful. There's several reasons why we have an inker. 1, it helps us speed up the process a bit. 2, they're amazing artists in their own right. 3, way back in the day, in the earliest days of printed comic books, a pencil line wasn't enough. You needed an ink line, and that is kind of where the style of comics came from. That's part of the reason why it's around still today. He gives a slightly thicker line to Spider-Man, so he pops out from the buildings. And so Wade, when he's done and when we're happy with the product, he scans it and the rest of the process goes digital. It goes to our colorist and our letterer. So our letterer for this piece is Joe Caramagna, who's been lettering Amazing Spider-Man for over a decade. Joe is amazing, and not only is he one of the best letterers in the business, he is the biggest fan of donuts in the entire world. Believe me, look it up. Anyway, oftentimes an editor will do a balloon placement where, I'll look at the script and give my idea where I think things go, and Joe will judge that whether he agrees or not. He takes it and he puts them on the page to help your eye not only make sure the words are clear, but he helps your eye kind of guide you along. He has our locator caption, 4 hours ago, Midtown. He does cool things like add this jagged edge to, hey, my purse. He does the classic comic book trope of sound effects. Thwip! That classic Spidey thwip. It always feels so good to read. He adds emphasis like this, up here from the purse snatcher as he swung around that post. So while Joe is busily lettering this, Marte Gracia down in Mexico, one of the best colorists in the business. Not only does he do the basics, Spider-Man is red and blue, of course, right? But he does so much more. He adds shading, depth. He helps shape things. He does really cool things, like he will take the black lines that were black on the webs and he'll turn them to a very dark gray, so they aren't as substantial as the buildings and Spider-Man himself. They are a little bit more liquidy, maybe a little sticky feeling. He'll also do something similar with the buildings in the deep background. He'll take a black line and make it a dark green line so that the buildings way back feel further back, so it adds some more depth to the shot. He'll paint the skyline to help, once again, frame Spidey in the background there. He'll add red to the purse to make sure that jumps out of your eye. He separates shadows and light from our bad guy to our hero. That was not in the inks or the pencils or anything. That was just Marte being awesome. So when Marte is pleased and we are pleased, and boy, are we pleased by this. It all goes to Joe Caramagna, who takes the inks, the lettering, the colors, and smashes them all together to make a comic book page. What is better than this? I will answer that for you. Nothing! Nothing is better than this. Our creative teams do this every page, 20 times an issue. And in the case of Amazing Spider-Man, 24 times a year. And this is pretty much the same process for all the Marvel comics that then get printed and shipped to a comic shop near you. I hope you go to a comic shop soon, pick up some comics and check out the beauty, the amazingness, the incredibleness that Marvel Comics does with every single comic. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey, and I'll see you in the funny papers.
If you're as excited for Agatha All Along as I am, and you're looking to get into some of Agatha Harkness's history in the comics, there is no better time to dig into the spookier side of Marvel Comics with the recent release of the Agatha Harkness, The Saga of the Salem Witch. This comic trade paperback collects several stories from Agatha's history, including her first appearance to her most recent appearance in the Midnight Suns miniseries from 2021, written by Ethan Sachs. In Midnight Suns issue 5, while the Midnight Suns assemble and take on the villain of the story, who is a centuries-old witch and former member of Agatha's coven named Corrosion, it's actually Agatha Harkness who delivers the final blow. Agatha uses a magical red dagger to steal Corrosion's power, claiming that power such as hers belongs in the hands of someone more responsible. The Midnight Suns watch as the attack ends in a magical explosion, leaving zero trace of Corrosion or Agatha. Believing Agatha Harkness to have sacrificed herself to save the world from Corrosion, the Midnight Suns are shocked when a younger, more powerful Agatha reemerges with a message assuring the team that they are more than their past. She proclaims, "We must leave the past behind us and focus on the future. A future that I, Agatha Harkness, will make."
Next week on the Official Marvel Podcast, we are joined by author Shannon McGuire to chat about her new prose novel, What If Wanda Maximoff and Peter Parker Were Siblings? A Scarlet Witch and Spider-Man story.
She grows up as part of a secure and loving family, of a functional family, and does not have to deal with a lot of the things that 616 Wanda did.
I will be tuning into that. And for you listeners, I hope you also tune in next week, but be sure to subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and tell a friend about us.
And that is it for today. This episode of the Official Marvel Podcast was hosted by Ray Lowe and myself, Preeti Chibber.
Our producer is Jasmine Estrada, with additional editing from Justin Harris.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Justin Harris.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger. And a special thank you to Patty Lapone.
Thanks, Patty. And thanks for listening. We will see you next week.